Welcome to the Siwike podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The Siwike podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Siwike Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here with our new guest, Richard. How are you doing, Richard?
I'm doing good.
Sounds great. So Richard comes to us with a background in tech. And, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now? And then we'll get a little bit more into your history. So what are you up to these days, Richard?
Yeah, sounds good to me. And I will say a quick background about myself, right? I went to University of Toronto, Scarborough, and graduated in computer science. So afterwards, I started my career in software engineering. So with mostly startup companies. Mm-hmm. And currently in my life, I'm working as a senior software engineer at a Series A startup company called Aspire, mm-hmm. which I joined just about a month ago. Yeah. I joined the company with intention to help out the backend code while having a mindset to also guide the product forward. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much what I've been doing professionally. And recently in my off time, after more than 6 years of working as a software engineer, I started writing and sharing tips and guide on how to become better software engineering through Medium as well.
Sounds good. And hopefully we'll get some of those tips in between. But I want to go kind of back in time and ask a little bit about Richard as a kid. So what was Richard like growing up? What was maybe an early fond childhood memory?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, it's a good question. I feel for me, I might give you a somewhat boring answer in a way because I will say as a kid, I am mostly pretty reserved, pretty mm-hmm. quiet in the classroom. Right, I'm pretty much not the smartest of the bunch, okay. But at the same time, I feel like I think I always had a knack for doing things outside of the box. Okay, and I feel for me, I'm very competitive and work really hard on the stuff I enjoy. For example, in school stuff, in high school, in computer science courses, or just even video games in general. And I feel like those are the two traits I still have till this day.
Yeah, so I'd love if you shared a little bit more about maybe some of the competitiveness that came out. Is it only in video games, or were there other areas, or maybe an example of the competitiveness in video games?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like in terms of how I feel how I'm competitive, I feel like for example, computer science is one of the course I feel I really enjoy, and I'm not the best at computer science in high school, but it's definitely one of the course where I took a long time to learn, and it's also one of the course where after school I also stayed to learn more about computer science, and I was almost always the last person to leave. So yeah, and because I really enjoyed the course.
And can you maybe walk us through, I don't know, the first piece of code or the first thing you did in computer science that kind of said, this is something that I want to do a little bit more of? Can you recall something like that?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like and this goes back to why I chose computer science major as well, where I feel like in high school I took a lot of courses you take the typical math course, chemistry, gym, or stuff like that, right? Yeah. I never really felt like I knew what I should be doing with them, right? I can write a math equation, but what am I supposed to do with them? But for computer science, I feel like that's definitely one of the course I feel like I'm creating something, and I don't necessarily know what I can do with it, but I feel like there's something I myself wrote that in other courses you don't get that feeling. So that's one of the reasons why computer science really I really like it.
Yeah, and was there an early piece of code or early something that you built that was particularly interesting for you?
I remember there's one where it's not really, well, right now it's really not interesting for me right now, but I remember there was this code where is this a locking mechanism? So I can enter something. If I say do you want to lock up enter a password. And if I type in like 123, you'll it will say like you have successfully entered a password. Otherwise, it will tell you to try again. It's a very simple code, but like that's one of the first memory I had in high school where I felt I built something that's really unique, I guess.
Sounds good. So in high school, it seemed like that you already had that affinity for coding and computer science. And was it a pretty clear-cut path for your university as well?
Was a really clear path for me in university. Definitely so. I feel like I feel like throughout my throughout my life, I always had a direct influence on leading me towards the computer science path, I guess. So, like for example, in high school, I had a lot of friends who were into technology and video games, as well as computer science or computer engineering, and that definitely gave me the influence on maybe I should also take computer science because I like all three of these things.
And were there any like familial, like family influences, or is it all just friends? It's just the people that you hung out with?
I will say they gave me indirect influence as well. So I will say like ever since I was a kid, my dad also works in IT. So whenever I was a kid, I will go to my dad's company.
Okay.
And during the break, I will see my dad and his coworker will be playing video games.
Okay.
So that I feel like that probably planted a seed in my head to say like, hey, if I'm in this profession, maybe I'm always with the computer. So maybe like during the break, I can also play video games. That probably has some influence on me. But in general, I feel like my parents are very not strict on what I want to do. They don't necessarily say like, oh, I have to take this course, or I have to be in computer science. I usually have the freedom to decide what I want to do in university or after university.
And ultimately, you made the decision to go into computer science. But as you were going through like university choices and applications and stuff, were there other options on the table, or was it just computer science programs at different universities and things like that?
There were, so when I applied for university, I felt like at the time computer science was really the only option.
Okay.
I definitely applied for other university as well, but so of all the university, like one that accepted me was University of Toronto, so I decided to take it because it's also close to where I live. So so that's why that's why I took computer science.
Nice. And what was the university experience like? Because I know a lot of folks when they're in high school, even if they got decent grades in something, then university they get shocked first year. Did you have a similar experience, or was there something else different in that path?
No, I feel like it was definitely a very, very similar experience with me. So like I felt I definitely had a very rocky journey, especially in university, because it's just a shock between going from high school to university, where I feel like everything's much more challenging and harder, and in university than in high school. So yeah, it definitely took a toll on me in university to like complete my major.
And what are some of the things that were difficult about it? Was it like the studying? Was it like a totally new environment? Was it like whatever different group of friends that you had to do it, or is it really just the subject matter, or maybe it's all of the above?
Yeah, I was just about to say, I think it's very all of the above. In terms like the when you're going to university, you pretty much have more freedom than you had in high school, right? So like when I went to university, I lived on campus, so not only do I needed to like take the course and graduate, I also have to manage my own like just normal everyday stuff, right? Just like, for example, cooking, rent, looking for rent, and other stuff like that. So it's definitely a different different than what I was imagining in high school, I guess.
Sure.
Also, the course itself did not help us all. I think some of the course definitely much harder than what I imagined. I feel like the first year is definitely one of the course there are definitely harder. But I think after you get through that point, you get more used to the university life, and it gets better from there.
Cool. And on things like cooking, like were you able to cook before? Did you know how to cook before, or is it really like you had to, I don't know, learn how to boil water and like make spaghetti and ramen, or all you did was like warm up the ramen? What was the learning to cook experience like?
Yeah, I definitely feel like that's almost all of our experiences. Like none of I live in dorm and none of us really know how to cook, so it's definitely we are like my roommates and I will be like trying to learn as we go. So like in the beginning would be like we will buy like a frozen patty and just we cook in the microwave. But later on, okay, maybe we will like upgrade to like like you mentioned, like boil the water and cook ramen. And maybe later on we get some more ingredients and we prepare a better dish.
And what was probably the most complex dish that you were able to prepare on a residence? Was there something that you were particular, or is it just, I don't know, frozen patties and ramen and mac and cheese or something like that?
I will say, unfortunately, I did not have the the best dish, only because like I felt like there was not a lot of time for me to prepare because of the schoolwork as well, right? But yeah, but like I would say probably ramen, or even just cooking, buying a frozen meat and cook it with that's probably the most complex I have gone to.
Sounds good. So you mentioned some of the courses and things like that, and I think you took a co-op program as well. So if you could describe a little bit about maybe some of the courses that helped or were super hard or hindered you, and then maybe a little bit on the co-op experience as well.
So your first question is like, what are some courses that help or hinder my experience with my career?
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say from university courses to working is a totally different experience. And for me, like the co-op I done, unfortunately, the co-op I done was not as useful as the other people's co-op, because the co-op itself did not really was on what I will be doing later on. So that's definitely one of my major regrets, because when I was finding my first job, it was definitely a very hard experience because I never had a good co-op experience on like what I would be doing during work, right?
Okay.
So, but I would say some and in terms of courses that help me or hinder me, I feel like I would say the first year, year 1 to 3 course, I think those courses are usually not as helpful when you're looking for a job. But like I feel like courses last year where you have to work on projects, I think those are much more helpful.
And can you talk us through a little bit more of the co-op experience? So you said it was tough to land that job. Like what was that process? Like how did you finally land the co-op job?
Yeah, definitely. I feel for the co-op job, it was so I went through. So I didn't go through the normal like we in U of T Scarborough we had this co-op program, but I actually went through the St. George this 1 year co-op program. So that the program itself, so they essentially gave you a list of like a bulletin board of job you can apply to. So and yeah, essentially I applied for one of the job, but the job itself was not very much related to software engineering.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why it was actually harder for me to use the co-op experience to land my first job rather.
Okay. How did you land that first job then? Because obviously it was a challenging one. The work experience didn't help. You had work experience, but it wasn't helpful. Courses were kind of so-so related. So how would someone with limited related work experience and probably okay grades, not exceptional. What was your process to land that first job?
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely hard, like I mentioned. So so after graduating, I know I had a diploma. I know I need to go to job website to look for jobs, right? But it's hard for me to I don't necessarily intel like what a job experience would be like, and that definitely hindered me in terms like when I go to interview, I would not know a lot of question when they ask me questions essentially. So I will say but I think the way I really landed my job is pure. I will say it's through luck as well as through don't be afraid of rejection. So I probably handed out 100, 200 resumes, and I probably got lots of rejection. But there was one company that I interviewed at where I felt I gained a lot of experience through the rejection. So when I actually went for the interview, I felt like I did okay, and they actually accepted me, and that's how I got in my first job.
Sounds good. So it sounds like tons of applications, and I mean, from my experience, 1 to 200 is about normal, to be honest. That's kind of the expected range for those that are lucky especially as a fresh grad, to do it in less than that. Well, consider themselves lucky, really. And then, did you do anything in terms of networking, or that was not on your radar at the time?
I will say probably the smart thing for me to do at that moment would have been having someone who can look at the resume for me, help me prepare for my interview. Unfortunately, I didn't do any of that when I first got my job, but that's something I should have done, definitely.
Yeah. So it sounds like that's more of the what not to do when job searching, and just go through brute force through sheer volume and numbers in order to land it. But yeah, are there any particular things that you should have would have done? So obviously having someone take a look at your resume. Are there any other things that you felt would have helped you along the way?
Yeah, I think so. I feel like for me, in terms of landing the first job, right? I think one thing that really could help me, a few things, right? The first thing is having the resume really matters. Like when you're first starting out, you don't have not a lot of experience, right? What you write there, really, really matters. And what you have on the resume could be, let's say, your hackathon experience, your open source contribution, right? Your GPA is a really good one, as well as some of the course you have done. Those things are really good on your resume because you just don't have that working experience to start off, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one thing I think I wish I had more on my resume, or knowing how to build that resume is very important, right? So having some sort of mentor that tells you hey, maybe this is some of the stuff you might want to write on your resume.
Right.
I think that's definitely important.
And what were your thoughts in terms of leveraging some of the co-op or the career center services and things like that? Or was that
definitely
something that was missed?
That's definitely one of my next point. Essentially, like I mentioned before, the co-op I had was not very much related to computer science, but in my experience and talking to other people, doing co-op, especially related to your course or work, is definitely very advantageous for you to land your first job, right? Especially because you might not even need to go on a job search like me. You might just get a return offer from sure. a co-op place you were just at before, right? So I think co-ops very, very important in order to land your job. And in terms of the resources that I got them from co-op, I think those are actually pretty important as well, because during my co-op search, I think they do tell you a lot of tips and guide on how to build your resume and write your resume. So I do think that helped me as well.
Yeah, so for those students out there, make sure to leverage your co-op office if you have access to one, or career center, because they have tons of resources, and you pay for them as a student, so you might as well take advantage of all the resources for sure. And tell us a little bit about what was the first kind of real dev experience like? When you were starting, was it what you expected? Was it totally different, or what was that first job experience like?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like landing I can talk about my first and my second job actually. I feel
Sure.
like for my first job, it's definitely like I mentioned, it's like it's definitely like a step in the door where like now I'm in the like land of this software engineering career, right? So it's definitely pretty surreal. I feel like at the beginning, I really did not know what I was really doing, right? But it's okay because you're just starting out. You're an individual contributor, and it's okay to for me at that moment to just focus on myself and gather as many experience as possible, right? And for me, like my first dev experience, it's actually pretty interesting. Where my a coworker of mine who joined around the same time, we actually built a system to automate our work. That was
Okay.
not from request from our manager. So
Okay.
that was definitely one of the more interesting like project we dev work and project we done in my first job.
Yeah. It reminds me of my first co-op when, well, I don't know if it was the first one. Yeah, one of the co-ops I had, but I was a network administrator and I had to log into like 40, 100 different machines, right? This was way back when a lot of the remote administration stuff wasn't available. So I created my own scripts and created like some integrations in order to do that. And normally it takes like 3 hours, if not more, to log into all those servers. And then my boss noticed that I was done in like 5 minutes after like the third or fourth week. And he's like, how are you able to do this? Like, oh, I created this. And he's like, oh, so I can imagine something similar. Well, I don't know if it was exactly the same, but uh, I don't know if you're allowed to go into more details about the automation and how you decide to build it or what was that? Because I think that could be a very useful experience for folks to think of from like an initiative perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I mentioned before, I like to work in startup company, and especially in startup company, you have to be proactive and take initiative, right?
Mm,
And for that project, it's very similar to what you did as well, which is that. So in the beginning, I was hired to do these somewhat manual work, I will say, right? So it probably like takes about like hours or so for me to like check like API requests and
mm,
responses. So my coworker and I had an idea of like, hey, what if we can build like a script to, let's say, automate this so we don't have to manually do this, right?
yeah.
So we, during our off time, we started building like this Python script. So he had actually have a year or two more experience than me. So he
Mm,
helped me build a script, and we started using that script to actually automate our work. Our manager saw it and he was pretty impressed by it. Where then he asked us to make a UI based on that script to
mm,
not only automate our workflow but automate the sales as well as like the making this whole process not even involve engineers, so like it can be self-serving, so like a
mm,
customer can use our UI to actually automate check their like API requests themselves.
mm. Sounds good. Sounds like how startups start,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And someone gets a product. And I'd love if you shared a little bit because you're now kind of working for a little bit, but you also have your own foray into your own startup. Can you talk a little bit about the Town app?
Yeah, definitely. So that was after I think my second job where so after working for about 3 to 4 years or so, I was in that startup environment. Liked I wanted to I want to work on my own ideas with a friend of mine, right?
Hmm.
So we started looking for a bunch of ideas, and I quit my job at that time to like pursue my different ideas, like towns, I think one of them.
Hmm.
So the idea there is like I was thinking about like the idea of having this uh, in our world, there's Facebook, there's Twitter, but they're always like they're a global like networking app, or even LinkedIn, right? So what if there's a way for you to like, or is there, how do I know like what's happening around me? So like that's the idea that I wanted to work on, which is like having a hyper local networking app. So my friend and I worked on that for about 6 months or so. So we actually had the app built. We launched on the Android as well as iPhone store. And we, unfortunately, one of the problem we had was that none of us are really marketers, or so we know how to build a product, but we don't really know how to sell it. Right. So that was definitely one of the bigger problem when we started finishing up the app. So, and later on, we had to put it on hold for now until like we can get into a better state where we can better sell the product, I guess.
Sure. So it's a little bit on pause. It could be resurrected if needed. And then obviously you've done a couple other things. You had a stint at Captivate and now just recently joined Aspire. So if you can walk us through kind of that last little leg of the journey, then just to round it out.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I mentioned before, right? Like I feel like for my journey is definitely not straightforward. It's very rocky because for me, I never really had like I felt like, I guess the saying was like, I felt like I never really had a concrete plan on what I needed to do. So I felt like when I joined Aspire as well, when I landed my current position, that was definitely me trying to accelerate my career, want to learn more, and taking the initiative and proactively trying to get to a good point. Because I felt like my previous position, the reason why I quit is because like I felt I was uncomfortable on being too comfortable in my previous places. So that's why I went to I joined Capital IQ to gain more knowledge. So when I first joined, the Capital IQ was a Series A company. So like when I left, we were on Series C. So I think I definitely accumulated the knowledge of like being in startups and how to help startups accelerate and help them like get to that like a point where they can also like get into Series C stage. And currently I'm at Aspire, and it's a Series A company. So I'm also hoping I can help grow the company into that like a Series C or even like even beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, sounds like there's a bit of a pattern emerging here. And I'd love if you shared a little bit about your recent foray into Medium and how did that start?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question. I think just a few years ago, I really had an epiphany where I feel like, for me, we talk a little bit about accelerating your growth, right? So for me, I think the way you will accelerate growth is you have to have this extroverted presence and extroverted influence. What I mean by that is that you could be an introverted person like in your own time, but for you to be for you to grow your accelerate is a key word here, right? Especially in startups, you have to be able to, if you're a problem solver, you have to first be able to let people know that you can solve the problem, and people who have problems to look for you, right? In order for people to find you, you have to be good, but you have to also have that presence, that extrovert presence, to let people know that you are that good problem solver that they need, right? So the second point is having a extroverted influence, right? So I feel like in order for you, like when you're first starting out as a software engineer, you just focus on yourself, but eventually that's not enough. So when you grow into a more senior role, you want to be able to influence others. That can be like a coworker in the beginning, but maybe later on into your team or your division or eventually your company, right? And that's definitely that's the thing that I wanted to do, was having that extroverted presence as well as influence. I think writing Medium article is definitely one of the steps for me to get to that point where I feel like I've been working for, like I mentioned, over 6 years now. I have accumulated a lot of experience on working with Python and JavaScript. I want to share that with the people, not only in my company, but also like I want to broaden my audience to like people, all the engineers, to like share what I can, and as well as learn myself as well. And that's why I started Medium articles.
That's amazing. And obviously, you're still early on in your journey, so lots of learning there. One thing that I want to mention to that is you mentioned extroverted, about extroverted presence, extroverted influence, which I think is interesting. So in my world, like presence and influence, I think are important. The extroversion part is really something that needs to be talked about, because you don't have to be you can still be an introvert and have a presence and an influence, right? Because I actually call myself what I call an outgoing introvert, because the tendency is I'd rather be in a smaller group of people, like having a one-on-one conversation, or not in a big giant networking event. But I can still post because I write for one person, I talk to one person, and then it just happens to be distributed to a whole bunch of things. But I applaud you for getting started, because a lot of folks who, my guess is you identify as an introvert. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So even putting yourself out there can be a big challenge. So the fact that you're even taking this step is amazing. And like I said, you're still on your journey, starting something new at Aspire, starting something new with Medium, and we'll see how that goes. I'd love if you can kind of go back in time a little bit and share some of your general Siwike, the stuff I wish I knew earlier. I know you dropped a few along the way, including like making sure someone takes a look at your resume, and then if you start something, find a marketer to help, because that would definitely be helpful. What are some other pieces of Siwike, the stuff I wish I knew earlier, that you'd want to share with the young Richards that are out there?
Yeah, definitely. Like, yeah, the point you made are pretty much correct. So, like, definitely when you're first starting out, like, seek mentors, like, seek resources that can help you, right? You're not alone in this journey. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Like, you don't have to like build your resume from the way you imagine it. There are definitely a lot of examples out there for you to build that resume, right? So that's definitely important. I think also, having the co-op experience, knowing I think having a plan really, really helps. Like, I feel like, I feel like for high school or university or even early parts of my career, I really never really had a good concrete, like I mentioned before, like a good concrete plan on what I needed to do. And that has led to like a lot of times where I felt like, hey, I'm doing this co-op, but why am I doing this co-op, right? Am I going to computer science in University of Toronto, but why am I doing that? I think building that plan is very important for you to know. Like, if you have a purpose, you have a plan, then you know how to get there, right? But if you don't, if you're letting life lead you, then you're just basing this on luck and like where you can land, right? So I think having a plan is very important as well. Otherwise, like I mentioned, be more proactive, take more initiative. I think that's really important as well. Like, for example, like having that presence, having that influence, as well as like, especially in a startup, I feel like you want to be, you want to take the initiative on getting what you want. Like, right, for example, let's say if I want a promotion, if I want the salary increase, you can't rely on your manager or to give you that. You have to be proactive. You have to seek that promotion out, right? And I think that's very important. Or even in a project, right? You could be an individual contributor in this project, but you have to have you have to take an initiative to ask why you're doing the things that you're doing, right? I think one tip would be like asking the 5 whys. Like, instead of having your product manager tell you what to do, like ask why you're doing the thing you're doing. I think that's really helpful for you, the young me, if I were to start off as well.
Sound good. A lot of interrelated but somewhat different concepts there where obviously the proactivity initiative, I mean, that could be related to having a plan as well. And I think it's very important what you mentioned about the why and the purpose that you're doing it, because that can help you as well. And for those that are out there that like they try to make a plan, but like, I don't know what I want to do or whatever, well, just give it a shot and pick something to go, and then you can always change it later on because you're young and you have plenty of years left. There's a lot that you could do there. And I like what you said about the proactivity, right? Because if as you said, like if you let life lead you, then you'll just get what you get, right? But if you're more proactive and ask for that raise, ask for that project, ask for that new whatever, then life can turn out a lot more different and more the way that you want it. And about the first point where you mentioned like mentors and resources, there's so much stuff out there. And right now with things like ChatGPT, you know, you might not even be a person. You can just kind of ask that, but be careful about outsourcing your life and your plan, your decisions to like AI or something like that, because they might give you something, but it might not be exactly what you want. But I found those pieces very, very interesting. And yeah, so thanks so much, Richard, for sharing your Siwike and your journey. And where can folks reach out to you and get connected with you? And what are some things that we can look forward to hearing about you in the future? Any plans or aspirations?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you want to reach out to me, you can find me on LinkedIn. So search Richard Luo, so Richard Luo. So you should be able to find me there. In terms of my future aspiration, like I mentioned before, startup stuff. I definitely want to at some point work on my own startup as well. So, but that's if there's opportunity in the future, I'll definitely take it. But otherwise, probably my future aspirations still continue doing what I'm doing, right? Try learn more, try to knowledge share more, and try to solve problem for others.
Sounds good. And we'll make sure to link all that information up in the show notes, and also your new medium that you're starting. Well, it's not that new, but I guess just up and coming. And thanks so much, Richard, for sharing. And hopefully we'll have you back for a future episode.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us on the Siwike Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Lukidanu, Lukidanu, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.